I think this is a turning point for Illinois. We try to put together as specific, as concrete, as forthright, as direct a budget as we possibly could. I've been governor 5 years, assumed office at a very difficult time in our state history. We obviously had an ethical crisis with one governor in jail and another one going to jail before I arrived. That was a big problem. We had to deal with it, and we passed strong ethics laws. We enacted a recall constitutional amendment that were, I think, imperative to restore public confidence in the integrity of our government. But at the same time, we had the Great Recession that plagued every economy in our country. Definitely hurt our state of Illinois because our fiscal resources declined precipitously in a very short period of time. And there were some things that had been festering for years and years, particularly the pension payments, that the chickens came home to roost. We basically, I think, shortly before I was governor, the pension payment of the state for all three of the major pension funds is $1 billion or $1.5 billion. Now it's over $6 billion. And we feel that it's imperative to pay the pension amount required every year, no matter what. We have done that all 5 years. It's been very difficult because, as was explained over and over again in the last 5 years, it puts a squeeze on other parts of our investment of public resources in helping the people of Illinois, particularly education and in human services and public safety and our health care. We had to reform Medicaid and restructure it a couple years ago. The Civic Federation of Chicago there said it was on a path of $17 billion of unpaid bills just in Medicaid if we didn't restructure. So I, in a budget address, called for that, and we did it. We also did the pension reform, as you know, and that is going to be the executive branch signed what the legislative branch, in a bipartisan way, passed. I was involved in encouraging that happening and working through Jerry and many others to get the pension reform done. Now the judicial branch is reviewing it, and it'll take a while for them to speak on the proposal. I believe it is constitutional. But we did not include in this coming budget, this fiscal 15 budget, any savings from our pension reform. We also, along the way, negotiated our employee contracts. We respect our public employees. We do not demonize our public employees. They do very hard and important work, and they're entitled to a decent compensation. And we negotiate the contract every 3 years or so. Took Jerry 15 months at the bargaining table with the AFSCME and other unions, but we came to an agreement, a good agreement that provides modest compensation increases for the workers, but a $900 million savings for the taxpayers in our health care costs, which is unprecedented. So pension reform, Medicaid restructuring, collective bargaining agreement that works for the public and for the workers, was ratified by 93% of the workers. And then finally, we had to reduce spending. Every single year, we enacted a law called Budgeting for Results, a bipartisan bill again. And every year we have to look at our budget, determine what works and is working, what isn't working so well, and determining our priorities. And we've cut $5.7 billion from our budget since I've been governor. And sometimes it's things like office space or less fuel used in vehicles. And other times it's the major things like the pension reform. So reducing spending, pension reform, collective bargaining contract, restructuring Medicaid, all these things kind of go into getting us to where we are today. We're in better shape today than we were 5 years ago, by far. Our economy has recovered. We have a long way to go in terms of full recovery, but we definitely have turned the corner. Illinois leads the Midwest in job creation, 257,000 jobs created since the recovery began. In terms of business expansion, We are third in the nation, I believe, in new businesses being created. Site Selection magazine said Illinois is third in the nation at corporate relocations and desirability for locations. But we still have a long way to go, and part of doing that is doing the pension reform. That was a cloud over the Illinois economy that had to be dissipated. And having said all that, because of these fiscal reforms that we've done, we've come to this turning point. And we have to decide which way we're going in the 21st century. Now, Joan knows Governor Edgar as I do, and not far from here in the governor's mansion, I called Governor Edgar last week before I made the budget address, and I said, I've been reading all the things that happened in 1997. Actually, I took all these notes of Governor Edgar's effort back then, in obviously a better time economically in terms of state government. It was the late 90s there. President Clinton was president, and the economy was humming along. So Illinois, the governor made a proposal really at the beginning of the year that we comply with our Constitution and listen to it, to what the people voted for, that the state should have a greater role in funding schools. That's what the Constitution says. That's what the people want. And so Governor Edgar in 1997 proposed more income tax funding for education and less reliance on property taxes to fund the most important part of the 21st century, which is educating our children. Not just our children, because community colleges and four-year public universities and scholarships for students in need to go to those colleges are very, very important to our economy. And so this turning point is where we're at right now, because in 1997, the governor's thoughts passed the House. It passed the House, his bill. It's not identical to what we're talking about today, but very similar, of more school funding from the income tax, less reliance on a regressive property tax that's not based on ability to pay. So the governor back then got the bill passed through the House, and then the Senate wouldn't vote on it. He told me last week the votes were there in the Senate for that proposal, but the leader of the Senate did not let it go to the floor of the Senate for a roll call vote. And it was killed in committee. It was too bad that happened. And to me, that was a loss for Illinois. And so we come back now, full 17 years later. He told me, Governor Edgar, one thing, make sure, have the two leaders on board with your plan. And they are on board with the plan I outlined last week. Speaker Madigan is sponsor in the House, and President of the Senate, John Cullerton, is supportive of our plan. We will get a vote. And it's very, very important to have this vote, because we have an opportunity, this moment in time, moment in history, to really do what's best for the common good. And that is to use our taxes based on ability to pay to really focus on education, which is the key part of the knowledge-based economy of the 21st century, and make sure that we don't underfund our schools and overburden our property taxpayers. Just in this community, the school district has to cut $5 million, I was told, from their budget. Well, that is not a good way to advance students in the common good in our economy. So we know this is going to be a very hard journey in the next 2 months, but it is essential for Illinois' future to have a governor who is direct, straightforward, specific, and honest about where we have to go. When the income tax surcharge was adopted in 2011, I said we were going to analyze it day by day, week by week, month by month, year by year, to see where we are. And that's exactly what I have done. I am telling people in Illinois what all of us need to know, that if we want to have good schools, if we don't want to have savage cuts to our education this fiscal year, then the plan I've outlined is the very best. Otherwise, this fiscal year, as you know, the income tax surcharge is available for half the year, but the other half it would not be. And the cuts alone in just this fiscal year are very, very serious for our K-12 and definitely for our higher education. and for our scholarships for students in need to go to the University of Illinois or University of Illinois at Springfield or ISU or any other public school or private school in Illinois. The MAP scholarship program would be cut alone by $80 million. That will deny a lot of students the ability to go to college. They couldn't afford it. Most of the people, more than half of the people in our college scholarship program, funded right now by roughly $400 million from people of Illinois. There's around 150,000 students going to community college and four-year public universities. More than half are of color. Most, or many, are a first person in their family to go to college. We can't deny that. That would be a tragic decision for the state to not invest in those human minds, those people who stay in our state and grow in our state. And so, and the savage cuts to the universities of our state that are really part of our economy would be regrettable indeed. I'm going to be at University of Illinois in Champaign this week. I'm going to be also up at Northern Illinois University. And then for our elementary and secondary schools, our estimate is 13,000 teachers will lose their jobs. And some people say, well, why don't you just cut spending? Well, we have cut spending by $5.7 billion over the last 5 years. That's one thing. But when you talk about cutting spending on education, that is very ill-advised. It will not make our state a better place. We want education excellence. You have to pay for that. People that aspire to be governor on the other side, when they say tax less, spend less, that means learn less. And I believe in a learn more government, a government that invests in education, that pays great dividends for our state. And it's not honest. In fact, it's dishonest. And it's a scheme to say that somehow the income tax of Illinois, those revenues will go down, and yet we'll spend more on education. That's just plain baloney. And I think everyday people understand arithmetic, that can't happen. And I know Governor Edgar, who's said pretty nice things about our budget plan, understands you cannot have better schools if you don't invest in them. If you starve education funding, the consequences are very bad indeed. And so that's really the moment in time that we have. We can decide to use our income tax system to properly invest in schools, not starve them, but properly invest in them, and at the same time provide direct, substantial, annual property tax relief to everyday people in Illinois who own homes. That system that we have, the property tax system, according to the studies, it's 20% above. The people of Illinois who are homeowners pay 20% above the national average in property taxes. It'll only get worse if we don't act properly now on our income tax situation to invest in schools and help reduce property taxes. And especially, we wanted, and Governor Edgar mentioned this to me, he said, we want to make sure that people who are paying property taxes really see what the relief is all about. I just left a group of realtors. We have a new home loan program called Welcome Home Illinois. I was describing that to them today, but I also told them that part of our plan, a direct, responsible plan, an honest plan, is to provide an annual property tax refund right before you pay the second installment of your property tax in the summertime. Every year people would get a check of $500 if you're an owner-occupier to pay your property tax bill or whatever else you want to spend the money on. The bottom line is you've got to be tangible. You've got to be specific at showing people that we are going to do something about a property tax system that takes too much. And I used to be the commissioner of the Cook County Board of Property Tax Appeals. That was the first office I got elected to in 1982. And it's the largest property tax appeal board in the whole country. So for 4 years, I heard homeowners and other property owners come forward with their evidence, their appeal to lower their property tax. Over and over again, by far, the most unpopular, unfair tax in Illinois is a property tax. So we have this moment, this time, this opportunity to do something about it, to really take it on, tackle it. And so that's why I laid out I think, a bold plan last week. It's not timid. It's designed to make Illinois a better place, especially by investing in education and dealing with a tax that is regressive, not based on ability to pay, that really, if you talk to businesses and individuals, it's the tax most unliked. We might as well deal with that, and rather than anything else. So I'd be glad to answer any questions. I'm sure there'll be plenty of those, and we'll go from there.
On the property tax thing, you didn't mention in the speech, but some people, I know, own expensive homes will actually pay more because you're also getting rid of the 5% exemption on the state.
There's a credit. Yeah, it's 5% of what you pay now. Right now, 7% of the people who claim the credit, there's about 2.1 million people claim the credit every year. It's been in place for a while, 2.3 million. Okay, all right, okay, thank you. But of the 2.3 million people, households you'd probably say, who claim the credit, 7% of that number get 24% of the tax relief. The people who own very large homes get the lion's share of the credit. Well, I don't think that's the right way to go. That's why we have a flat $500 refund that you would get every year. The median amount of credit is about $200, meaning more than half the people who claim the credit in Illinois, more than half of the 2.3 million households, get less than $200 today. So they would get a rather sizable increase in tax relief. 7% of those who frankly own mansions or larger homes, very large homes, they would just get $500. They wouldn't lose everything, but they wouldn't get $2,000 or $3,000. That's, to me, wasn't the right way to go anyhow, to give $3,000 to people who are extremely well off in property tax relief, and then somebody who owns a modest dwelling gets $100.
Yeah, if I could just, the only other thing, and I'm obviously in the middle of a campaign, and I've got a guy named Quinn following you around, because what you are saying now about the need and the honesty of moving forward with tax at 5% is different than what you said in the past and during the last campaign. You know, they've got a quote in the Runner campaign put out from the Arlington Heights Herald. You know, you would veto anything over 4% for, and then it was supposed to be sunset. So they're saying that you can't be trusted because you changed your tune. Well,
what happened in January of 2011, we were told in no uncertain terms by our creditors and credit rating agencies, if we didn't act with speed to shore up Illinois finances, we were in grave danger of going into junk bond status and a lot of other bad things. So I had to act in January of 2011. It wasn't easy. The bill passed. I signed it. The very next day I was asked, well, what's going to happen in the future? I said, well, day by day, week by week, month by month, and year by year, we're going to have to analyze the situation as the facts and evidence present themselves to us. And that's really what a governor has to do. You have to act promptly if there is extreme danger to public finance. Now, for years, the state government did not put proper amounts of money into the pension fund. I have. And by the fact we have complied with the requirements, that meant less money was available for other things in government. And that's why we pushed so hard for the pension reform. And we got it done. And we did a lot of these fiscal reforms that bring us to this moment. Now, if the state pulls back on the income tax, it will have $1 to $2, maybe $1 billion less for education. You shouldn't just look at the first fiscal year, fiscal 15, because half that year you will have the income tax revenue, the surcharge. The other half you wouldn't. So you can't just say, well, we're going to lose $1.6 billion in the first year. Well, the second year is probably going to be closer to $4 billion, fiscal 16. And so we have to make a decision right now. And I believe in doing it before the election, laying out a budget that's concrete and specific, and then the person who aspires to governor on the other side, to run around and just say, well, we can tax less and spend less, and we're going to have economic growth, and we're going to have more education. In Carbondale, that person said, the tax rate should go down to 3 from 5. And he said, we're underfunding education. Well, it doesn't add up. And I was with a group of second graders last week at a school in Chicago, and they could tell right away that doesn't add up, okay? And so I don't think we want a governor who can't add. We need to have a governor who understands arithmetic, and especially with these children's future, to deny them proper funding for their schools for political gain. I'm not buying into that. I believe it's better to tell people what they need to know and do it in a forthright manner, in a bold manner, where we can literally change public finance in Illinois to a fair system that encourages economic growth. Because our plan not only has a property tax refund for people who own modest homes and homeowners, period, but we also improve the value of the earned income tax credit. Now, when I became governor, the earned income tax credit in Illinois was 5% of the federal amount. Democrats and Republicans, bipartisan, have said this is the very best way to fight poverty, keep families together, reward work. The earned income tax credit at the federal level and at the state level are very pro-family, pro-work. Can't get it unless you're a worker, unless you're raising children. I believe in this. So we improved the value from 5% of the federal amount to 10%. I did that as governor. And I've now proposed that we increase it from 10 to 20% of the federal amount. And we can do this. This is affordable, and we can do it over a period of probably 4 years or so. I think it's a very important part of the plan because for folks who don't own a home, this would be a very significant measure of tax relief. And people are, I think, those who raise kids, we want to help them raise those children and help them have more time to spend with their children. So those are the two items of tax relief that I think are important. There's one more. There's a tax credit for employers providing job training for new jobs. We want to reward those employers who are helping those who come to work and get skills to get that job, and then over a period of time they get a tax credit to pay for the cost of that training.
Even so, after the speech, I spoke with a couple of Democrats who are keeping their options open about extending the tax, but they also said they were disappointed to hear you talking about increasing spending, discretionary spending in any way. They thought it would have been better if we're going to call for an extension of the tax increase, to also pledge to hold the line on spending for 2 years, 3 years, somewhere down in the future, to convince the public that you are in fact spending the money wisely.
Well, we are spending money on the discretionary account at 2008 levels. That's where we're spending today. Our plan does call for, over the next 5 years, a significant new investment by the state, using the income tax, in education. I don't feel that our state is really listening to the Constitution. State investment in education through the income tax, I think, is the right way to go. We also have, in addition to our K-12 spending, and have a Birth to 5 initiative, which Jim Heckman, who is a Nobel Prize-winning economist from the University of Chicago, said the very best investment government can make is early childhood. So our Birth to 5 is dealing with prenatal, early childhood education, parental support for at-risk kids. We're investing in that. Our view is that investment of $1.5 billion over 5 years pays tremendous dividends and savings to the state. Less violence, less people dropping out of school, fewer teen births. All of these things are right now facts. And the studies show that if you invest in early childhood, it helps prevent a lot of not so good things happening. And so this is, to me, smart government. You make investments in things that work in order to prevent costs down the road. We don't want to have more and more people going to prison. We want to make sure we have folks who follow the rules and have positive lives. I want to keep saying it over and over. We are at a turning point. If we listen to those who are the apostles of doing nothing or harming in many respects, and I would include my opponent in that, it will harm Illinois for a generation. His proposal of cutting dramatically the income tax necessary to support not just education, but many other things in our state government that are very, very important. We went through a very cruel and difficult winter. We want to have 2 more cadet classes of state policemen. These are the men and women who pull people out of the ditch in the middle of a snowstorm. We have a state policeman right now who's at the hospital at Loyola Medical Center, got run over by a truck in the middle of a snowstorm. He's battling for his life. The other tollway worker was killed. So we've got to make these investments in public servants. And I'm never going to demonize men and women who take their lives in their hands and who do a good job. And that kind of virus in the Illinois body politic that's been unleashed by my opponent is bad, bad, and bad. It's a very bad way to go. We need to, I think, tell the public at large that investing in good teachers, investing in good state policemen, investing in those who take care of nursing home oversight, they're very important people to all of us. If we have to cut our budget the way the do-nothing crowd wants, we're going to have fewer regulators to keep an eye on places like nursing homes that have many of our seniors, and that won't be good. And we just passed nursing home reform. We want to make sure we invest in it.
One of the things that your opponent would say is that he wants to get more to education, and you're stressing education because it makes it look bad to the public, but you could do things. I think they talk about Medicaid, they talk about state employees taking over, checking Medicaid eligibility when it was an outside firm they thought was doing a good job. So just, he says it's a matter of priority, so his priority would be education, and he would be fine.
Well, I've done Medicaid reform, restructuring.
So
Yeah, it's easy to say to do it. I mean, even, Civic Federation isn't, I don't think, necessarily president of my fan club, but they have to give us credit for identifying the problem and then doing something about it. On Medicaid, one question the other side has to answer is, is their position on getting the federal money to cover all the new people in Medicaid? I signed the bill. I think it's a very important expansion of health care, the biggest expansion since Medicaid and Medicare came along. Our state right now, about a third of a million people have already signed up either for Medicaid or for new people or for the health exchange. We'll find out what the numbers are after last night. We hope to have higher than 330,000, but we are accepting the federal money, just like the governor of Ohio, a Republican, does. Indeed, the governor of New Jersey and the governor of Florida. But the person on the other side in Illinois says his models for governance are Scott Walker in Wisconsin and Mitch Daniels in Indiana. Well, neither of them accepted 100% federal funding for people coming on to Medicaid who are getting health care for the first time in their life. That's what Rick Perry in Texas is talking about, not accepting money and leaving people uncovered. I don't believe in that at all. It's much better for the public to have healthy people from the get-go, a wellness society. So we expanded Medicaid, and we are accepting the federal funds. And for those who talk about Medicaid reform and don't give you a straight answer on that issue, that's just plain wrong as well.
Governor, there are those who say that the state aid formula, even if it's fully funded, which I don't believe it is right now, is unfair and provides a much disadvantage, especially to downstate schools. Do you have a position on Senator Menard's?
Well, we've been working with Andy on that. Andy Menard is the state senator. I think several other senators, I think Senator Luke Titfeld maybe have a role in that. We're very interested in that. We want to have a formula that provides education funding in the fairest way possible. So I think that's worthy of discussion. But what is unworthy is to say somehow you can starve schools, radically reduce their funding in an extreme way, and somehow have excellent schools. That doesn't add up. But my plan is designed to help that happen. A plan that just starves education, no matter what your formula, everybody's going to be coming up short.
So where in your 5-year plan does the state reach 100% funding of the state aid?
I think by the end of the plan, we are at 100%.
At least.
It takes 5 years to get to 100%?
No.
Could be earlier.
State
Could be
aid
earlier.
funding?
Could be earlier.
Yeah.
In fiscal 15, we will invest the largest amount that the state has ever been able to.
Yeah, when we say that again, our plan is designed to invest more money in education than at any time in state history. It's also the property tax relief through the refund is the most significant property tax relief in state history. And so we want to be bold in this area. Now, we have a 5-year plan on purpose because it shouldn't, this is what corporations and other governments do elsewhere, have a look forward. It's not a rigid approach, it's a blueprint, but it is, I think, helpful to everyone voting to say, where are we going to be in 5 years? I know where we were 5 years ago. We were in dire straits, and we've moved to getting this state in a lot better fiscal shape today than it was then. And the other thing, when you hear the folks who are against the income tax, back in 2011, they voted no. Every single one of them voted no. Where would we be if we listened to them back then? I know I went to Georgetown University, and Bill Clinton was a senior when I was a freshman, and I was in the School of Foreign Service. And when he had to act decisively and boldly, in 1993, after he was elected, he didn't have one Republican vote. And they all said the economy will go to hell in a handbasket. Well, he had to do that to stabilize the American economy. And we did pretty well in the 90s under his leadership. And I think it's important to understand that the crowd that votes no all the time and says do nothing is the way to go, they're very damaging to our future. They don't have any real plan. It's a scheme. It's a dishonest scheme to wreck our schools. The person I'm running against does not respect our teachers who do very important work, who sacrifice some of their present in order to help our kids' future. He does not respect public education. Underline the word public. My mom worked in a junior high school, public school for 33 years. Those men and women who work there give their lives for our kids. And this demonization, particularly of public education, by saying that somehow we're going to be better by wrecking public education, by underfunding it, is really a scheme to have the system of public education we have in our state completely turned upside down. So that's going to be one of the issues in this whole campaign. Are we going to invest in our public schools, or are we going to switch to this demonization of public education? We passed education reform in a bipartisan way with everybody sitting together in 2011. And I signed that bill. And we had to keep everybody in the room. We had all the teachers' organizations and those who are in the school boards and such. And we got a good school reform bill passed, a model bill. And we want to now invest in that bill. Teacher accountability, performance over tenure, report cards for parents about how their kids' school is operating and doing. Those are important things.
Pay for state workers. What are the prospects of that occurring? We have a lot of leaders for state workers that want
Yeah. Well, I believe in the right of collective bargaining. I don't believe in demonizing public workers. It's never easy, when you're bargaining at a table like this. People go back and forth. Well, most recent contract was 15 months. But having said that, I think the contract we arrived at received 93% ratification vote. So it was a good way to go. And we're going to do it again. We'll have to start bargaining for the contract that'll expire on July 1st of next year, correct?
She's saying the raises were in the budget.
Yeah, does your budget account for the back wages?
Oh, the back wages, I support that. Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't hear you. It's about $100 million, $110 million. I think we should put that on the table every single budget I've put in, I want to pay those amounts. They go back before I negotiated before I was governor. The House and the Senate, bipartisan, both houses, leaders of all four caucuses, they don't want to put it in. I think they're wrong. And we've had litigation. What has come about is we're $100 million short. We've been able to pay some of the raises. We actually in the first year paid some of the raises through our savings. We're $100 million short. I wish they could. We tell them all the time. We put it in our plan. They take it out. I don't know why. It seems to me it shouldn't happen that way. That was a contract, and I put the funding in for the raises. The legislature, both houses, both parties, take it out, and we ought to end that and get it resolved once and for all.
So it's in the 2015 budget proposal?
Actually, it's in the 2015 proposal, and we'd actually prefer it to be a supplemental
In 2014. To get it behind
And that's
us.
where we put it.
There's a,
Oh, I was just gonna say, you speak of children, the status of a permanent DCFS director, what is this?
Well, the person I appointed as acting director is a very, I think, responsible and well-regarded person. She's a lawyer. She's also a social worker. So she's the acting director now. We're doing a search to find the permanent director, and that will happen.
and what about Julie Hamos and Manny Flores? Was this an end around the system?
There were epithets that were used in discussing Julie Hamos by the Senate, certain senator, that were very, very unfortunate. And the moment it happened, I called up the Jewish Federation. I called up others. I was not happy that happened. I said right away that's beyond the pale. The apology was given by one of the senators for his use of language. She's doing a very hard job restructuring Medicaid. There are certain senators that don't want to vote for her, or at least at this time, they wanted more time. And at the request of the President of the Senate to get more time, we acted last week.
And are those epithets, is that in the public domain, or is that?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was last year.
Have you had a chance to look at the latest gambling expansion proposal, and how do you feel about that?
Well, we're willing to engage in that. It's been a 4 or 5 year exercise. We have certain core principles. We believe there should be extremely strong ethical oversight by the Gaming Board of Illinois, which has a long history, almost quarter century now. And we don't believe in campaign contributions from the gambling interests. That would have to be part of a law. But basically, the Gaming Board is a good regulator, and they've ferreted out bad things in the existing casinos. So for a while, we had to fight that battle. Chicago wanted to regulate itself. I think they've pretty much given that up, and they understand the Gaming Board will call the shots. That's principle one. The second principle is make sure that the money that is derived from gaming goes to core priorities, especially education and things like that, including probably pensions of educators. So Chicago, wants a casino. I don't want to have Chicago get money from a casino and then ignore its responsibilities to school children and to those who teach the children. So that has been an express principle. Now, there are other places in Illinois, Danville, Rockford, south suburbs in Lake County. We would want those principles to be maintained there. I think there's an opportunity to have that discussion this year. I wouldn't hold your breath on that, but you never know. It could happen.
Do you have any problem with the number of video gaming terminals, like on every other block in Springfield now, at every other restaurant?
There is local option. There is a local option to not have any video gaming. There's also a local option to, I think by petition, people can choose to eliminate it in their town. But, basically, some of the towns that originally said no have kind of reconsidered. Video gaming took a while to get going, and it is here. It has been used, those revenues, to invest in infrastructure, or capital bill. And we have had great success with that bill. We have to address next year, the fact that at the end of this year, our capital bill, the 5 years will be over. So we have to look to the future, the next 5 years. That's why we put that
There was a
in.
group today at the State House calling for a big capital plan. It's a coalition, 4 cents a gallon on gas, 7 cents on diesel, ending ethanol credit for gasoline, among the things that would pay for their 1.8 billion in revenues.
That sounds more like a road program there.
So.
Yeah.
Are you open to
I'm
those
not for the
things?
gas tax, no. That's a depleting resource at the federal level, at the state level. We're going to have to take a look at a different way of funding transportation.
Besides gasoline and diesel, any of the per gallon stuff.
I just think it's a depleting resource that doesn't provide the money you need. We do have to engage in this discussion. In the budget said we were going to have a bipartisan group, both houses, both parties, to talk about the next capital plan. We're anxious to engage that.
We're going to have one more question we've got is the new.
Governor, there's a rainy day fund in your budget. How does that get funded?
How does it get funded?
How does it get funded?
Yeah,
Normally there's a trigger of events that fund rainy day
Yeah,
funds.
Jerry is
As
the
governor said,
architect.
we'll be negotiating with the General Assembly as to what would be the trigger. We've paid down the backlog of bills by $5 billion since its high of 9.9. So somewhere around the sort of 30-day payment cycle, that trigger should go into effect, and we're going to negotiate with the legislators as part of the tax bill as to what would be the trigger and what would be the amount, but it's very important to have a rainy day fund.
I do want to maybe finish up because it kind of relates to this. We have been told in no uncertain terms by those who buy our bonds and by the credit rating agencies that judge our state's credit. They were very complimentary about the pension reform that happened in December. And so we went out to market with $1 billion of Illinois bonds early part of this year. We got a $60 million savings. The bidding by 109 bond buyers and the credit rating agencies was quite encouraging. They said, you did the pension reform. What you have to do now is you have to have a permanent structure for your revenue and expenditures, and they have to be in balance. You cannot have a temporary situation. You must be permanent. It can't be maybe. It has to be definite. That's what we were told very bluntly. And they said if you don't get it done by May 31st of this year, you'll probably suffer the consequences shortly thereafter in your rating. You need to do something that has a balance and is permanent. And if you do that, we have a very good chance of being rewarded for this. So that's why this budget becomes so important. Not only how we fund education and what kind of fairness we have in the system. Do we over-rely on property taxes? Do we have a generous enough earned income tax credit? All those are important elements. But if we don't act by having a decisive public finance structure, we'll suffer the consequences. And that means our bonds will get lower rated or poorly rated, and it'll harm our ability to do a lot of important things in Illinois. So that's why I'm determined to get this done. And I have the support of the Speaker and the President of the Senate, and work very hard on this. And we appreciate the kind words you said recently, and we need your help. Because there is a group that wants to just bury their head in the sand and say, well, wait till some other time.
So they said that they would downgrade our credit rating if we did not make it.
They didn't say downgrade. They said if you don't act by May 31st, there will be consequences. We'll figure it out. I mean, that's what we got to figure out. We got to have a permanent revenue expenditure structure that's sustainable, that's in balance. That's what we were told, and we take it seriously.
Well, are you taking it as a downgrade?
I would say I don't want to invite anything that's bad. I want to say what people need to know, that if we don't act by the 31st of May, there can be very there can be consequences that none of us want to have happen.